have a little snack, some leftover chicken. So I've done a pretty good job of cleaning it up and getting all the muscle off. And here we see, this is the forelimb of the chicken wing. This white thing here, when you find that at the ends of bones, that's cartilage, so that helps cushion and absorb shock or impact at those joints. This would be the elbow joint. So we have the humerus, the ulna, and the radius. And then the wrist would be here. This part right here, birds have a thumb basically. That would be the thumb bone. And then they have a couple of finger bones that come down into this part.
The gastrointestinal tract of species can vary greatly. Dogs, pigs, reptiles, and humans are examples of species with a monogastric system, which means that they have one stomach that is used to help secrete and digest their food. Cows and goats are considered ruminants because they have a 4-part compartmentalized stomach, each with a different job to help try to break down their food. Typically, their food is consisting of hay and grass. Horses have a glandular stomach, similar to humans, but much of their food is broken down in something called the cecum, which is found in between the intestine and the colon. Their diet also typically consists of hay and grass. Many of the same gastrointestinal diseases that are found in humans can also be found in veterinary medicine. One of the disease processes that we find happens more frequently in veterinary medicine is when we find a foreign object in the GI tract. This usually means that the animal ate something that they probably shouldn't. This is a case where a dog had a hard time going to the bathroom. When we did an x-ray over the abdomen, we found a metal piece inside the stomach. Metal shows up as white on an x-ray. We removed the metal filter surgically, and the dog has made a full recovery. Today we're going to be answering some questions. The first question that I received was, vets have to put down pets as part of their job. That must make it hard to be a vet. Well, being a veterinarian is not always easy, but it's definitely most difficult when we're performing a euthanasia or putting an animal down. When an animal does not have a good quality of life, that's the time that we start to consider performing a euthanasia, so that we can try to relieve the suffering of animals that are too sick to have a good quality of life. What kind of animals do you get most often? Luckily, since anatomy is mostly the same, I'm able to see reptiles, birds, and dogs. But since I work in South St. Paul, most people that are coming to us are usually here for their pet. I went to school in the Cayman Islands, and down there I did have some specialty training in marine animals like sea turtles, and I was able to work at a zoo when I was in Illinois, so I did get to work with some fun animals. But we do get a lot of dogs, cats. We see pocket pets like rats and chinchillas. We just saw a snake today. Birds, anything that can fit pretty much inside the door, we will take on. What kind of things have patients come in with, and how do you treat them? Are there any similarities or differences in the way humans are treated? Well, since anatomy and physiology is similar from species to species, we do see a lot of cases that are similar to cases that a human physician would see. We see cases of kidney disease that can be seen in humans. The treatment is relatively similar, although we typically don't put our patients on dialysis like in a lot of human hospitals would. Although we do actually have dialysis machines for animals in the US, we just don't have it here in Minnesota. There are some other things like diabetes. We also use Vetsulin, which is insulin that very commonly will be used in human medicine as well. You know, a lot of the medications are actually relatively similar. Like a lot of the antibiotics we use are the same stuff they use for humans. Some animals and some species, like guinea pigs for one, have a lot of bacteria that they need for digestion in their system. Some of the antibiotics that you would use for humans, actually you can't use those necessarily because that may actually disrupt some of the bacteria that's found in their GI tract. Dogs often will tear their cranial cruciate ligament, cranial cruciate ligament is pretty much the same thing as an ACL. And, sports players will tear that one as well very frequently. Another question is, what is the coolest, most useful animal part that most people wouldn't know about? Well, there are a couple pretty cool and useful parts to animals that humans don't have. And something that I think is actually pretty interesting is something called the tapetum lucidum. This is a layer in the eyeball of many animals, such as cats and dogs, that kind of reflect and make it almost look like it's shining. In my own cat, who was a 18 to 20-year-old cat found by the police that I figured needed a home, you can see here the very strong reflection of the eyeball. This is a layer of the eye that is behind the retina, and this layer actually acts as a reflective barrier for light to shine in front of them so that they can actually see a little bit better.
So you might remember my friend Hissy. Reptiles are cold-blooded animals. They still have a heart and blood, but in order to get their cells to the perfect temperature, they'll have to do some things like lay out in the sun. They have a respiratory system to get oxygen into their bodies and to their blood. So they have nostrils, an air passage called a trachea that goes down to 2 lungs, one of which is shrunken. So this long body has to have a few adaptations. One of the ways it does that is by reducing the size of one of the lungs. The lungs take in the oxygen to the blood. The blood delivers it to the cells. Digestive system has all the same organs as humans. So it has a long esophagus that goes down to a stomach. After the stomach is a long intestine, but instead of being coiled around and around like inside of our bodies, it just stretches out long. The nervous system. Snakes have brains up inside of a cranium, just like you. Its eyes and sense of smell are all part of the nervous system. So you may have heard that snakes smell with their tongue. What they're actually doing is sampling the air with their tongue, bringing the tongue inside and flicking it up into that Jacobson's organ, which is at the front of the brain. So they have a keen sense of smell, but they do use their tongue to bring the smells in. Skeletal system. A lot of people don't realize that snakes have bones, but they do. They have a long backbone that runs the entire length, a lot of vertebra. That vertebrae are flexible, so it can bend around into all these shapes. And they do have ribs, but the ribs don't come together like in the human to make a cage. They're able to open up and spread, which makes sense when you're swallowing something large like the mouse. Up in the skull, there's a hinged jaw, just like we have, but their hinged jaw separates, but those can stretch and drop down so that the mouth can open up very wide for its prey. Okay, there are no legs. However, back in Darwin's time, they noted that back here, there are some pelvic bones. Pelvic bones are for legs to attach to. So to Darwin, that was evidence that snakes at one time did have back legs.